A woman in Shanghai divorced her husband over a box of sausages. At least, that's what everyone thought. But according to her, the sausages weren't really the but according to her, the sausages weren't really the reason. The real reason was that she discovered one night during the COVID lockdown, when she quietly pushed open a bedroom door and realized her husband had been hiding something from her for days. Back in 2022, when Shanghai went into strict COVID lockdown, millions of people were suddenly trapped inside their apartments. Entire neighborhoods were sealed overnight. No restaurants, no grocery trips, no food delivery. If you didn't already have supplies at home, things got difficult very quickly. For one couple in their early 30s, it got difficult within days. They both worked office jobs and lived in a small two-bedroom apartment. When the lockdown started, they assumed it would only last a few days, maybe a week, so they didn't panic. But as days stretched on, the kitchen slowly emptied. First, the vegetables were gone, then the eggs, then the last pack of instant noodles. By the second week, the only thing left in the cabinet was half a bag of rice. Every meal became the same: plain rice in two bowls. No meat, no vegetables, no oil, just rice. They would sit across from each other at the table, quietly eating the same bland meal every day. But around that time, the woman began to notice something strange about her husband. Instead of eating at the table, he started taking his bowl into the second bedroom. At first, she didn't think much of it. Maybe he wanted to watch videos while eating. But then it became a habit. Breakfast, lunch, dinner. Every single time, he would quietly pick up his bowl, walk into the side room, and close the door behind him. She asked him once about it. He just shrugged and said he wanted some privacy. That answer felt a little strange, but she didn't push it. After all, lockdown had everyone feeling stressed. But a few days later, something else caught her attention. One night while washing dishes in the kitchen, she heard a faint sound coming from that room. A soft, crickling noise, like plastic packaging being opened. She stopped washing the dishes and listened. That sound lasted only a few seconds. Then everything went quiet. When her husband came out of that room later, he looked completely normal, holding an empty bowl, smiling. Still, something about that moment didn't feel right. The next day, the same thing happened again. He took his bowl of rice into that room, closed the door, and a few minutes later, that sound again. Plastic. This time, she walked down the hallway and stood outside the door. She could hear him moving around inside. Then, suddenly, a smell drifted through the crack in the door. It was faint, but unmistakable. Meat. Real meat. And that made absolutely no sense, because they hadn't had any meat in over a week. Instead of knocking, she quietly pushed the door open just a little. Only a narrow crack, just enough to see inside. Her husband was sitting on the edge of the bed, with his back slightly turned toward the door. In his hand was the same bowl of plain rice he had carried in earlier. For a moment, nothing looked unusual. Then she noticed something strange. His other hand moved quickly toward his mouth, and that's when she saw it. A sausage, half eaten. He hadn't noticed the door open yet. He was chewing quickly, almost hurriedly, like someone trying to finish something before being seen. For a few seconds, she just stood there, silently, watching. Then she pushed the door open the rest of the way. That sound made him turn around. The moment their eyes met, he froze, still holding the sausage. Neither of them spoke. She slowly stepped into the room and looked around. The room itself looked normal. No food on the desk, nothing on the floor, which made it even stranger, because the smell in the room was unmistakable. Meat. After days of eating nothing but plain rice, the scent felt almost shocking. She looked back at him. Where did that come from? He didn't answer immediately. Just sat there holding the sausage, like a child caught doing something he wasn't supposed to do. It's nothing, he said finally. Just something I saved earlier. She stared at him. Saved where? He shrugged it. But the explanation didn't make sense, because there was nowhere in the room food could be hidden. So she started looking. She checked the desk, nothing. She opened the drawer, still nothing. Then she walked to the wardrobe. The moment she pulled the door open, he suddenly stood up. You don't need to check that, he said quickly, which was exactly the wrong thing to say. She moved the clothes aside, and there it was, a cardboard box, tucked deep inside the wardrobe, half hidden under a pile of shirts. She pulled it out and opened the lid. Inside were dozens of individually wrapped sausages. For a moment, she couldn't see anything, because the box wasn't just full of sausages. It was also full of something else. Empty wrappers. A lot of them. They had all been carefully stuffed into a plastic bag and placed back inside the box. Dozens of them, which explained why she had never seen any trash. He hadn't thrown them away. He had hidden them. She slowly lifted the bag of wrappers. The plastic crinkled in her hand. So, this is what you have been doing. He didn't answer. How long? Another pause. Then he said quietly, about a week. A week. For 7 days, they had been sitting across from each other at the table, eating bowls of plain rice together. And every time he finished, he came into this room and ate sausages. Alone. She looked at the empty wrappers again. There were a lot of them, more than she wanted to count. When she looked back at him, she expected to see embarrassment or guilt. Instead, he smiled, not nervously, almost playfully. Don't be mad, he said. I was going to share later. The woman later said that moment was when something in her mind shifted. Not because of the sausages, but because of the way he reacted. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't apologize. If anything, he seemed mildly annoyed that she had discovered the box, as if she had interrupted something private. That night, they still ate dinner together. 2 bowls of rice, just like before, except now she knew that inside the bedroom closet, there was still a box of meat. And every time he stood up after dinner, she knew exactly where he was going. At first, she tried to tell herself it wasn't a big deal. People behave strangely under stress. Lockdown was hard on everyone. But the image kept replaying in her head. The wardrobe, the hidden box, the plastic bag full of empty wrappers, and his face when she found it. Not guilty, not embarrassed, just smiling. The next few weeks were strangely quiet between them. They still lived in the same apartment, but something invisible had broken. They stopped talking during meals. Sometimes they wouldn't speak for the entire day. She said that the worst part wasn't even the secret. It was realizing that, while she had been thinking about how to stretch the last bag of rice so they could both eat, he had already decided to take care of himself first. And the more she thought about it, the more disgusted she felt. Not anger, something colder. Like suddenly seeing a stranger in the place where your partner used to be. Eventually, the lockdown ended. People were finally allowed to leave their homes again. The city reopened. Restaurants came back. Food was everywhere again. But the marriage was already over. A few months later, she filed for divorce. Some friends thought it was ridiculous. All of this over a box of sausages. But for her, the food had never been the real issue. The real problem was that when things became difficult, her husband had quietly chosen himself. And once she saw that clearly, there was no way to pretend she hadn't.